Gelbtuch, and Jamie is the founder of a company called Cultural Mixology. I love that name. And what Cultural Mixology is, it's a company that does cultural coaching and training. And so, Jamie, tell us a little bit about where you started in your career of living and work career, and how you got to cultural mixology.
Sure. Well, I've always had a love for languages and a mind for business. I think it's the combination of what my parents gave me. And so I studied languages and business in my schooling. And I went on to work for a French company for several years, went back to business school. And then after that, began looking for a way that I could actually combine both of those interests. And one thing led to another. And I ended up starting to do some cultural training, which I didn't know was a field until I got into it.
Okay.
Started doing some freelance work while I was looking for other jobs, and the more I did that, the more I realized I liked it better than the interviews I was going on, and I decided to see if I could make a career out of it and found Cultural Mixology.
How did you come up with the name? It's very inventive and creative.
Thank you. I played around with a lot of words that had to do with the mixing of cultures. And I came up with cultural mixology. I had some doubts about it because a lot of people think I run an alcohol-related business, which is where mixology tends to usually be used. But I just thought it was just, I don't know, the most creative thing I could come up with that was the blending of cultures together.
So tell us a little bit about the cultures, and for those that might not really know what you do. So you loved languages. What languages do you speak?
So I speak and work in English, French, and Spanish.
Wow.
I speak intermediate Portuguese, and I'm a novice at Arabic. It's my hobby, so I study that.
Very nice. Very nice. So how does it work? How does your business work for those that might not understand cultural mixology?
Sure. So my goal through cultural mixology is really to work with individuals and organizations that face cultural challenges in what they do. So really to kind of coach and train people with an eye towards cultural differences and how an awareness and an adaptation can really take their work to the next level.
Okay, so so coaching and training, you are hired by a company to go in and work with individuals, teams, to help them settle in, to learn the ropes.
Yes, so all of the above.
Okay.
Sometimes I work with expatriates that are headed overseas or who have just arrived here in the U.S.
Okay.
And I would either do a 1 or 2 day training or an ongoing coaching engagement over a number of months. And we would look at where they need to adapt to be most effective. So that might be communication style, it might be how they give feedback to those around them, how they build relationships inside and outside of the organization, any of those business functions.
So, hypothetically, someone who is transferred to New York from Timbuktu, I'm making it up, they worked in Timbuktu a really long time, and now they're coming to whatever big city name you want, Boston, Chicago, New York, and the culture's different than in Timbuktu or Padang, you know, or some smaller town. And what would you help them with? Just go into detail so everyone, including myself, I don't even know if I'm on the right track here,
Well, it could be a number of things. Everybody comes with their own set of experiences and challenges in the new place. Some of the challenges may be on the personal level. They may be settling in. How are you adapting? How is your family adapting? You know, the the number one reason that people fail on an assignment is often that their family is unhappy. So kind of ensuring that that personal piece is together. And it may be the work environment. So sometimes people feel that they're being taken in the wrong way by their colleagues. Maybe they're too direct, maybe they're too indirect, maybe their team doesn't seem responsive or doesn't offer feedback. And so we can look at a number of challenges. But one thing you said also, if they come from Timbuktu and here we are sitting in New York, culture exists on many levels. And so there may, while of course a lot of what I do is national culture, sometimes it is could just be the city culture. I mean, even within the US we have so many regional differences, generational difference, organizational difference. So we're actually dealing with a lot of layers of complexity.
Do you also work with people overseas that come here?
Yes.
And that's got to be a bit of yet a different culture.
Absolutely.
So do you find that people that come from overseas and settle in here in the U.S. Have it easier, tougher than people that come from the smaller Timbuktu, Padang, and go to the bigger cities?
Well, most of the people I work with are going between one country and another, so I don't often work with people that are doing domestic relocations. But I will say that in terms of who has it easier, because I do get asked that question a lot, are there easier countries to come from or to? And I think it really comes down to people and their mindset, and the people that go into the experience knowing that they don't know what they don't know tend to be more successful than those that think they know everything about where they're going.
So somebody that was a VP or a high-level manager, and they come here, and they're used to working a certain way, such as maybe somebody coming from Germany, and I also have clients in Europe who I work with, and they work a certain way. And that works for them, and then they come here and they find that the way they've been working doesn't work so well here in the company. How do you go about retraining them, giving feedback, constructive feedback, so that they aren't altogether stripped of what they do well, but helping them kind of toughen, soften where they need to be?
It's a great question, and it's a great challenge that I face with everyone I work with, and also recognizing that everyone is different, right? So we have these national tendencies, but we also have individuals that bring their own experiences and beliefs to their assignments. And I don't try to change people's values and beliefs, but I do believe that we're all capable of a wider range of behaviors that are still supported by the core values that we have. So, looking at those values and looking at what could be some additional behaviors that are comfortable to try out. But I tell people, if they're not uncomfortable, they're doing something wrong. Because if you are completely comfortable from the get-go, then you are either missing something or you're not immersing yourself enough in the challenge. So we look at ways, little by little, that they can try out some of these new behaviors. We go back, we assess, did it work, how did it feel, what was the reaction, and we go from there.
So when somebody knows they're being reassigned or assigned to, are they given this training before they make the change, or is it they come and settle into their new environment and see what's working and what's not working, and then the training takes place?
It happens both ways, and I think that there are advantages to doing it each way. So if you're going on a first-time assignment, for example, and you've never been to the place, you don't have much experience, I think that beginning this training beforehand is very helpful at setting your mind at ease, giving you information up front, getting those wheels turning. For someone that's already an experienced expatriate or has a greater level of familiarity, I think that sometimes it helps to get settled in a little bit more so that we can look at really more of the nuances, and they can have some real examples of things they've experienced, and we can dissect those.
Okay. So when they call you in to work with them, do you work one-on-one? Do you work with the team, or both?
I do both. So a lot of coaching and training is one-on-one, or sometimes it's one-on-one with family members. But there are also a lot of cases with international teams or teams that work across borders, and they're not moving anywhere, but they're still dealing with their counterparts in France or Brazil or China every day. And so maybe during a time when the team is all in one place, we build in some of that cultural training to some of their meetings and activities, or maybe they are all in one place and we can do kind of an ongoing assessment and look at the cultural profile of each team member and see, what the makeup looks like.
Now, do you come up with your own programs that you offer to these companies?
I do. I design a lot of my own materials. Some companies do have materials that they like you to work with, so I work with and adapt to those as well. And each situation is different. Sometimes it's a team training that's very interactive and experiential learning, and sometimes it's more one-on-one coaching, just like you and I are sitting here and talking for an hour.
And how long is the trainings? I mean, is it ongoing? Is it 6 weeks? Is it a year? Or how do you kind of design the programs?
Companies offer a whole range of things that will depend on the arrangement the employee has with their company, and with individuals we craft our own plan based on what their goals and challenges are. So a training could be anything from 1 to 2 days, and a coaching engagement could go on for 3 months or longer.
Okay. Do you do any role playing?
I do role playing. I think role playing, I think experiential learning in general is very important, because we can talk about what it's like to do something, but until you are actually in the mindset or you're actually acting out the part, it can be very difficult. So for example, let's say I were working with a team with 2 different nationalities, let's just say French and Brazilians. We might come up with a common problem in the company. So say your shipment is late, or you're waiting for a response that never comes, and I might divide the team into the 2 cultural groups and ask them to write the email that they would write requesting the information and present it to the other side. And then we might critique how each side presented or requested information to kind of really get our heads around, why are they asking that way? What are they asking for? Was that clear? Why wasn't that clear?
Very interesting. So is there one particular culture over another that has the most challenges for you?
I think a lot of the most challenging assignments I see for people are the cultures that appear similar on the surface. So a lot of people will actually say that going from the UK to the US or vice versa is very challenging, or US Australia, or I've done team building with Canadians and Americans, if you can believe it. But I think the reason those are so challenging is because the differences are nuanced. So when you go from the US to Japan, you're expecting massive differences.
Absolutely.
When you go from the US to Canada, they're a lot more subtle, and you may miss them. So I think that some of the more challenging programs are actually the ones you might not necessarily think about.
What are the nuances?
So between
whichever group,
whichever.
let's
Yeah.
say U.S. and Canada,
Okay,
where
so
we're kissing cousins, if you will.
Yes, this is right. Canadians are great at telling you the differences between
I'm
Americans.
sure.
In Canada, they say 50% of being Canadian is just not being American. So,
Well, it is a country in a sense.
yeah. So I think part of the differences between those cultures have to do with how group or individually oriented we are. Canada is just a little bit more group oriented than the US. So for example, their motto is peace, order, and good government, things that are very group oriented. Where in the US, we're life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is very individual.
Right, me, me, me.
Right, me, a little bit of me, absolutely. Other differences, I think we're slightly more hierarchical here in the US than in Canada. A lot of that just comes from history and how our cultures evolved.
Right.
We had a slave trade here. Canada never had that. So factors like that kind of come into play. So yeah, and they're all very nuanced. I would never say that it's not competitive in Canada. I would just say we're more competitive. It's fast-paced in Canada, but we're faster-paced.
Well, what other countries that you've worked with are more likely to mirror our culture, if there is one? I'm not sure there is or there isn't. In the way we do business.
I see a lot of similarities, comparing New York and Hong Kong, for example. So there are larger cultural differences, but on the city level and the way business operates, just kind of the fast pace, sometimes the direct nature of things, the go, 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 the drive towards capitalism and achievement. I see a lot of similarities between those two places.
However, not with the people.
However, no, underlying a lot of that business culture, I still think there are great fundamental cultural differences.
What type of cultural differences, if you can talk about it, do you see in the different cultures? We know ours. Hopefully everyone, we know ours. And I think on many levels what we're trying to do is really get to the more emotional intelligence. Our country is working on it. There are a lot more organizations that are willing to put into play the humility, for higher ups, patience, empathy, self-awareness, and then other awareness. So we see and read and hear so much about that. I'm wondering what other countries might also have picked up the baton for introducing emotional intelligence within their structures.
I think that a lot of other cultures, in fact, a majority of other cultures are more relationship and group oriented, and I think that's important when it comes to emotional intelligence, because you're more connected to and in tune with the people around you. You have tighter knit groups, and you need those tight knit groups also for effective communication. So I think that in some senses, the U.S. being so individual and being more task-oriented as opposed to relationship and group-oriented makes maybe the emotional intelligence a little bit more challenging sometimes.
And that's what I've heard, that other countries have introduced it a lot sooner than we have. Whereas now it's, you never even heard that expression up until, I don't know a few years ago. So what would relationship cultures look like?
Well, there's a great analogy that's used always in the intercultural world, and I can't take credit for it because it's not mine, but it's very well used. And it's called the peach and the coconut, and it looks at how we form relationships differently. And many, many cultures in the world, many more, are coconuts. So they have kind of a hard outside shell. It's very gruff, can't just eat a coconut if you want to. You need to spend a lot of time cracking it open. But once you get in, the sweetest part is in the middle. Whereas Americans, for example, would be a little bit more like peaches. So we're very warm and fuzzy on the outside. Hi, how are you? We smile, we wave at everybody, right? And then a peach you can bite right into. And we would segment a peach, you know, into a lot of different pieces. And we kind of have different friends for different reasons. We're not just like the whole of the coconut. So you're my work friend, and then I may have a university friend. You might have a friend from a class I take on the weekend. And then in the core, that pit of the peach is our real relationships, right? Our nuclear family, our very, very close friends. So it's a little bit in reverse. And so I think that, you know, going back to the relationship building, that's kind of a challenge that a lot of people face, because much more of the world operates like a coconut. They need time to kind of build the relationship. But once you're in, you're in. You're not just an interest-based friend like you might be in the model of the peach.
So the peach, it's a very funny analogy, actually, quite good. So when you think of the peach, it's like everyone's friendly, but then when you really get to the heart of it, what's important is the nucleus, I guess, their family, their core.
The friendships just look different, and that's something I really try to stress to people, is that it doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other, that it's, you know, the peach is interest-based relationships, and we kind of separate them. We don't cross those boundaries. If you're my work friend, I may not have a barbecue with you on the weekend, but the coconut is much more being-based, so we're not friends in the coconut world because we both play tennis. Maybe I play tennis and you play squash, but that's not the basis that forms our relationship.
So what does form the relationship with the coconut, if you will?
Yeah, great question. It's really who you are as a person, because it's a much more holistic view of relationship building. You've taken the time to really get to know that person in a more multifaceted way.
So a friend would cross over many boundaries, if you will. That you might have met them in university, but then they, you know, maybe you work in the same industry and they become part of your family and friend, etc. And that's really true, actually, about the U.S. People are segmented. You know, people you have for this, or you go to, you know, your book club, or you have them for the movies, or and they don't really cross lines.
And then we move and we reinvent the whole peach.
That's very funny. I like that. It's very cute.
Thank you.
Oh, what else can you tell us about? This is very fascinating, actually. You know, whereas countries, especially this one, where we used to be of one or two varieties of culture, we've become so multi-faceted in cultures that come here, that they're from all ends of the world, that come here, and we may work with them, we may get to know them on a social level, so it's very, very different. Whereas I think in Europe, you know, countries are so close to one another. That you know, people do cross borders. I don't know, I could be wrong, but they do cross borders a lot easier than this country, where you've got, you know, each state is not a country, other than the different, how people speak, their accents, you know, they may have a little bit of a different, but basically it's American. And so as more and more countries infiltrate, then it becomes, there's a lot more cultures to deal with. And that goes through business too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, you know, the sheer, well, every country has regional differences. I think the sheer size of the U.S. In terms of land mass and population does make it a little bit unique. You know, we have 315 million people here, right? It takes 6 hours to go from New York out to California. So we do experience so much cultural difference. I never feel so much like a New Yorker as when I go anywhere else, you know, in the country. country.
Exactly.
So that definitely, it definitely plays a role, and also geography plays a role. You know, you mentioned in Europe, it's so easy to cross borders, and the U.S. is relatively geographically isolated. We just have two neighbors, right? Canada and Mexico, and so that plays a difference in how much Americans, you know, have access to other cultures, and with what facility they'd have that access.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank
we have
you,
another
Terry.
minute or two, but before I say something, it was really fascinating.
I really enjoyed it.
You were very nervous. How are you now?
I think I'm okay.
Great.
But thank you so much
This is really wonderful. So we have 2 shows in December. December 1st, my guest will be Russ Terry, and it'll be the Terry and Terry Show. And then December 15th, I have Lori Lawson, one of the past presidents of ICF. And actually, December 15th will be our last show on Coach World TV. We are actually signing off with Coach World TV after a very long run. And so Lori and I, who have really been the 2 real co-founders of Coach World TV, will be together on the 15th, and we will, I don't know, sing, dance, give a big bang goodbye for what we've really enjoyed, and hope all of you have enjoyed. So we'll look forward to seeing you in December, and I don't know, we have another minute or 2 or seconds. We have actually a couple of seconds, and I really wanted to thank Jamie for being here tonight again. Really a great show. I loved everything she had to say on this whole cultural mixology, and I was very fascinated by it, and that was why I brought her on the show, to impart some of her wisdom with you.
Well, thank you, Terry. I'm honored to be among the last guests that you will have on this wonderful program.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us for all these years. We've really enjoyed you.